everyone, it's Cashew. It's the Cashew Paul Adventure Channel, and today's adventure brings us to Wapakoneta, Ohio. We're going to visit a museum dedicated to a man who was a Navy fighter pilot, a test pilot, and an astronaut. He was the commander of Gemini 8. He was the commander of Apollo 11, and he was the first man to set foot on the moon. That's right, Neil Armstrong. We're at the Neil Armstrong Air and Space Museum. I've been here before, but I don't remember much of it, so we'll discover it yet again together. Our adventure starts here. This is an F-5D Skylancer. It was an F-4, but NASA tweaked it so much that it stopped being an F-4, hence the F-5D Skylancer moniker. This is one of 3 in existence, and Neil would use this to train pilots, future astronauts, on how to deal with in-flight emergencies. Danger, keep clear. Danger, keep clear? I think we better go inside. On the way in, I noticed the official Armstrong Museum vehicle. Pretty cool. Oh look, there's the lunar lander on the back. What an appropriate license plate. This is really appropriate architecture. You see the dome looking like a moon, and then you see the hills where it looks like the lunar surface. And then the pathway has blue lights, looks like a runway. And here's a wall of Ohio astronauts. This is James Lovell, who was commander of Apollo 13. And ironically enough, Neil Armstrong was on the investigative committee to figure out why Apollo 13 had its mishap. And this shows a very extensive timeline of aviation history. Here's a very young Neil Armstrong. Here's a picture of Chuck Yeager with the glamorous Glennis, which he broke the sound barrier with. And that airplane is at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. I love this poster. It reminds me of those 1950s sci-fi movies. This is a wood carving called Astro. More cool scientific articles that look almost like sci-fi. A young Neil Armstrong. This is a painting of his birthplace, which was his grandmother's farm, located 5 miles south of here. The museum is pretty inclusive. Here's a lunch pail he carried when he was in 1st grade. This is a Boy Scout patrol flag from 1940, signed by the scout troop, including Neil. He received his pilot's license on his 16th birthday and could fly a plane before he could legally drive a car. Check out Neil's senior high school photo from his yearbook, 1947. This is Neil's Navy uniform, his flight jacket and headgear. Any of you remember the old bomb shelter signs? How about civil defense? Here's a canister of bomb shelter survival food. Notice it was the Kroger company who supplied bomb shelter food. This model of the F-9F-2 Panther was the type of fighter jet Neil Armstrong flew in Korea. When he was a fighter pilot, he was hit by anti-aircraft artillery and had to bail out. In fact, he had several incidents during his fighter pilot and test pilot career where he had some close calls.
Racing to maintain its lead, Russia surged along the road to a man in space with tests on dogs. Man's best friend became the pioneer of the Soviet cosmonauts.
The genesis of Planet of the Apes. I'm glad to see they also pay homage to the animals that traveled in space against their will. This is Sam, a rhesus monkey who flew on an early version of the Mercury spacecraft. And this is Laika, who flew for the Russians. And unfortunately, this dog did not make it back. Oh, check this out. This is a replica of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite in space. Here's Neil Armstrong's Gemini 8 spacesuit. Neil Armstrong was also on the Rogers Commission that investigated the Challenger explosion. Also on that committee was physicist Richard Feynman. He had won a Nobel Prize in 1965 along with two other physicists for quantum electrodynamics. Neil and Feynman did not get along. Neil felt that Feynman was too much of a wild card, kind of a maverick, and anybody who knew anything about Feynman knew that was the case. He was an individual thinker. Feynman didn't get along with Armstrong because he felt like he was a NASA/government yes man. If you'd like to find out more about Feynman's involvement with the Challenger investigation, there are plenty of documentaries out there you might like. This is the first woman in space, Soviet Valentina Tereshkova. It would not be until the 1980s when the U.S. would allow women into space. This is a nice piece of memorabilia. Here's Neil Armstrong's bicycle. I'll see if I can get a better view of it for you. This is his machete from survival training when he was an astronaut. Sadly, it's not space dust. Now this is a really cool part of history. This is the airplane that Neil Armstrong flew to receive his pilot's license when he was 16 years old. Here's a closer look at his airplane. I'll show you the tail in just a second. Look at this. This is the Gemini 8 space capsule that Neil Armstrong flew with David Scott. And this was Neil Armstrong's seat. It's hard to imagine this actually flew in space. One of the tour guides told me that the computers we have at home are stronger and better than the ones that the Gemini and Apollo missions had. The computers on Gemini were 64K. The Apollo missions used a computer with 72K. However, they did the job because they did not have to go on Facebook, Amazon, and LinkedIn and things like that. Among their many objectives, Gemini astronauts worked on spacewalks, in-space docking, and pinpointing their splashdowns, preparing themselves for the Apollo missions that were to come. This is a model of the command module from Apollo missions. And you can see just how cramped the quarters were. The Apollo missions were flown on this Saturn V rocket. And you can see at the very top how tiny the command module was compared to the rest of the rocket that got him up to space. These are samples of the type of food eaten by astronauts in the Gemini and Apollo missions. Tuna salad, chicken and rice, cream of tomato soup, and applesauce. Does anybody remember the space sticks you could get at the grocery store? They were like chocolate sticks. I guess they were modeled after these. Privacy, please. For those of you who wonder how do they go to the bathroom in space, now you know. The urine collection device and a fecal bag. I'm going to read this, but you might not want to hear it. To defecate, an astronaut attached a special bag with an adhesive coating to his buttocks. The astronaut then guided the waste into the bag with his fingers. He placed a capsule of germicide into the bag, sealed it, and kneaded the contents. Then the bag was placed in storage. Today, astronauts use a toilet much like the ones on Earth, but operated by vacuum suction. Why did they have to make the fecal bag clear? To sleep in space, they would use a sleep restraint, which is a lot like a sleeping bag. This is a two-piece coverall or in-flight that was used, and it was made with fireproof material. The soles of the boots have Velcro on the bottom, so they could stand in a Velcro patch on the capsule and be able to be more stable during weightlessness. This piece of material is known as a constant wear garment, and this is Jim Lovell's from Apollo 13. These are just a few of the many awards given to the Apollo 11 crew when they went on their goodwill tour after the mission. Here's a bust of the man himself, and we rub his nose for good luck. This flag was carried aboard the Apollo 11 mission. They have all these tools, but they don't have the handyman's secret weapon, duct tape. The museum does an excellent job of making things look very dramatic. Here at the end of this long corridor is one of Neil Armstrong's spacesuits. This is Neil Armstrong's backup suit during the Apollo missions. It weighs 190 pounds here on Earth, but only 32 pounds on the moon. In an interview, Buzz Aldrin said that all the photos that you see of their mission were of him, because Neil had the camera. Buzz once said, "Neil may have been the first man on the moon, but all the photos are of me." This is a lunar sample that was collected by Apollo 11 in July of 1969 by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. It's composed of fragments of the moon's original crust, which is estimated to be over 4 billion years old. Astronaut Alan Bean also painted, and he painted this picture. Surrounding the image are signatures of previous astronauts. This is Alan Shepard's signature, and on his Apollo mission, he hit a golf ball on the moon. This is Buzz Aldrin's signature. I met Buzz once. He was a very nice guy. Wow, check out this passageway. And this gives the illusion that it goes down further than what it actually does. I remember the Apollo-Soyuz mission. This is when the US and Russia docked in space and shook hands in space. Here's a model of the modern-day astronaut in their suit. I'm not sure if you can see from the glare, but this plate was left on the moon after the Apollo 11 mission. It says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." And it's signed by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, who piloted the command module, and Richard Nixon, the president at the time. In 1971, Neil Armstrong retired from NASA and became a professor of engineering at the University of Cincinnati. The suit on the left is a replica of the suit that astronauts wore on the space shuttle. The suit offers anti-G protection during re-entry, and if they had to land in water, it would protect them for 24 hours in waters of temperatures of 45 degrees Fahrenheit. This is pretty cool. These are gloves that were worn by Russian cosmonauts. They have a shuttle lander simulator so you can see if you can land the shuttle. Let's see what I can do. Fail. These are some of the old cameras they used, and you can see they're pretty antiquated compared to today's cameras. A camera like this one recorded Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon. They also take a look at some of the more recent missions. Here's a replica of the Mars rover. These are some of the foods that were designed for the space shuttle. These look a bit more appetizing compared to the food on the Apollo missions. This shows what the console of the lunar lander looked like. Here's a lunar landing simulator you can try. But since I failed so miserably at the space shuttle, I'm going to pass. Even their gift shop is cool. Sadly, they only come in kid sizes. Me too. They have some cool string gangs. Here's Ham the chimp. And this one looks like Robert the doll. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 landing on the moon. So if you're in the Wapakoneta area, you should come check this place out. The staff are very friendly and very knowledgeable. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And if you're already subscribed and you know someone who might like my channel, ask them to join us on our adventures. Until next time, this is Cashew signing off. Check out this car. This is a 1921 Essex. The grill, the wheels, and what else did you say was?
The body.
The body.
The body and the grill is the only thing that's original.
Body and the grill are original.
And, rears are 41 Ford, rims swapped and flipped so they give us clearance. Front rims are Volkswagen Bug. Reverse mounted 41 Ford front end. 31 front wishbones, 55-gallon barrel drums for the seats, 27 windshield, the chopped inch and a half.
The windshield is a 1927 Ford that's been chopped in half.
I actually built a wind tunnel in my garage with 5 box fans to figure out the pitch of the windshield so to cut the hair over your head.
And for the antifreeze overflow, they have a commemorative Elvis mason jar. Very cool.